All right, hello folks. I'm Keith Codette. I'm the Executive Director at the Museum of Off-Road Adventure, also known as the MORA. I'm here today with Mike Boatler, and we're out here in Maryland. What's the name of this town again?
Hughesville.
Hughesville, Maryland. And we have purchased this 1956 Chevrolet Napco brush truck from Mr. Boatler, who's been a great keeper of this vehicle and preservation of this vehicle for the last, how many years have you had this?
13 years.
13 years. Now, Mike, I guess before we start talking about why this vehicle is unique, could you tell us a little bit how you came into possession of this truck?
Well, I'm a antique truck enthusiast, and I specifically like the 56 and 57 Chevrolet trucks because of their one headlight design. And this truck became available when a friend of mine notified me that Damascus Fire Department was going to sell this truck. And I got with Damascus and ended up with the truck.
All right, that's awesome. And to your knowledge, you had spoken a little bit with me earlier that the truck, after it had gone into original service with Damascus, was used for some sort of construction purposes?
Correct. It's my understanding that Damascus owned the truck up into the mid-70s, and at some point there they sold it to a fire department member, Mr. Johnson, who was a brick mason, and Mr. Johnson proceeded to weld a mortar mixer and a water tank on the truck and used it for his commercial bricklaying business for 20 years or more. And that's really where most of the damage and where all the fire equipment was taken off during his ownership of the truck.
And in all those years, this truck didn't get many miles put on it, did it?
No, that's correct. The truck, to the best of our knowledge, has got about 18,000 miles on it. Mr. Johnson used this truck on construction sites where he would park the truck at the site and leave it there until he ran out of water to feed his mortar mixer, and he would drive off site, get water, and then drive back. This was not an everyday vehicle for them, and of course it never had a lot of miles on it, being in a rural fire department as well. So we think the 18,000 miles is just about right for it.
Fantastic. Now, the history of Chevrolet obviously is very rich, and this truck here is a little bit unique because it has a NAPCO four-wheel drive conversion system done to it. And you said, to the best of your knowledge, that was done right in 1956, right when the truck was put into service for Damascus, correct? Correct.
So what happened in Damascus Fire Department history is they had needs for a brush truck, and at some point in time had acquired a 1932 Rio, and the Rio was in service and threw a rod. So they now had a need for a new brush truck, and that would have been about 1955 or early 56. And they in turn then got with their local Chevrolet dealer, Damascus Motors, and they purchased a new cab and chassis from Chevrolet. And that would have been a two-wheel drive truck, but it was bought as a windshield cowl, two-wheel drive, ton-and-a-half truck that they then had the NAPCO four-wheel drive as a third party. As you know, NAPCO was third party back then. Chevrolet was not making in-factory four-wheel drive units at that time. So they had a third party install the ton-and-a-half front axle and transfer case on this truck. And then locally, Damascus then sourced out getting the service body transferred from the Rio onto the Chevrolet and transferring the pump and the pump manifold and different pieces of equipment that were still salvageable. They put them on the 56 truck and made this basically a home-brewed, one-of-a-kind fire brush unit that was unique to Damascus only.
That's really some interesting history. So there's parts of this vehicle that are now well over 75 years old because they came from the Rio originally. Things such as the seat, the pump, and things like that.
That's correct. They some of the items that jump out real quick that are would be visible would be the two-man wraparound bucket seat that came off of the Rio. The waterless gear-driven water pump that's frame-mounted and PTO-driven that came off of the Rio, as well as the water manifold for drafting water and discharging water. All that came off the Rio, and the actual hose bed in the back with the headache rack / roll bar on it, that came off of the Rio at the time that Damascus transferred all the equipment.
That's very, very interesting history. I guess changing subjects a little bit here right now. When I originally met you through the internet ad where we ended up finding this truck, I did a little research and found out that you're quite known in the Chevrolet truck community for being kind of a task force historian and one of the foremost people out there that knows a lot about the 55 through 57, even 59 task force series trucks. And you have quite a collection here of trucks yourself that you showed us, which has been awesome. We really appreciate that. In all of your time in researching these task force trucks, how many other NAPCO four-wheel drive open cab task force have you found?
None. In my 13 years of researching this vehicle on the internet, and of course now with the internet, we get information leaps and bounds, and it's readily available. And to date, I've never had anybody approach me on the internet or anywhere else and say, "Hey, Mike, I've got one of these somewhere." The windshield cowl chassis that Chevrolet sold is a unique piece all in of itself, but it's even that much more unique because it's got a 1.5-ton NAPCO four-wheel drive front end under it. Now, with that said, there are NAPCO four-wheel drives out there, but the ones that are out there are going to be on a conventional cab with doors and a roof and the back wall and such. They're not
Things
open
like
cab.
that, yes.
So this makes it stand out a little different. There were utility companies that had NAPCO front axles put under some of the big line trucks and pole trucks and things like that. The oil fields used big trucks and stuff like that, but not open cabs.
Exactly.
And so it makes this one very unique. And to date, I've never had anybody show me a picture of one like it. So
most likely this is a one-of-a-kind truck that was built really out of necessity because the Rio died there. So that's very, very interesting.
Right.
Trying to think what else we would want to talk to about this. You said the truck is pretty much all original. The engine was replaced at one time or another. We don't know why. Probably sand or the engine wore out or something, even though it was a low mileage truck. So the engine's been replaced, but the rest of the truck, for the most part, as it sits, is survived with most of its original equipment all these years.
That's correct. It's still got the original paint on it. What's left of it is the paint that the fire department put on it. The markings, Damascus on the side, are still visible, and on the hood and on the side cabinets. It's believed, other than the modifications that Mr. Johnson made for welding a mortar mixer on the back and for welding a gravity feed water tank way up high behind the driver passenger seat, most all of the steel and all of the metal that you see on this truck is the metal that was put on it in 1956 when it was built. The truck, for the most part, was built in a local garage in Damascus. They then farmed out the cabinets. They added cabinets to the truck. The original Rio was just a running board, exposed fender, chariot-style cab body on the back, if you will. And so Damascus sent the truck down into Washington, D.C. and had a metal fabricating shop build up the side compartments, cabinets. And as fire departments were evolving through the 50s, more and more equipment was being carried and more equipment that they wanted to keep out of the weather and be ready when needed. So the cabinets was a smart thing to do, and so that's what they opted to do when they changed over. But to save cost, they actually used the original hose bed off of the Rio, and then just bolted on the cabinets that are here now onto the sides of the Rio hose bed. And that's how it kind of evolved into the way it's evolved.
Absolutely. In fact, you shared with me earlier, prior to this interview, that you even believe it has the original tires on it still.
I do. We've acquired some photographs that I've transferred over to you all, and most of the photographs show the Goodyear Diamond snow tires. You can look right on them. And the fire department back in the day would paint the diamonds white to make them look like white walls and to make them look spiffy. So when they got in a parade, they would make sure to go out and paint their little diamonds all white and paint the Goodyear words white and kind of spruce the truck up to pretty it up for a parade. And those tires are still on the truck. They're still the diamond tread Goodyears, which we believe to be the original tires from when the truck was purchased new.
That's very interesting, and that's fantastic to be able to preserve something that has been, you know, used very sparsely, and then of course instead of being scrapped or something like that, you know, this is a very interesting opportunity to be able to preserve this one-of-a-kind truck. I do appreciate you sharing everything with us. Mr. Butler has also, as he mentioned, given us all sorts of pictures and documents documenting everything that he knows about this truck and the truck's history over the years. And he's really the right person to have kept this truck for so many years, and I'm glad that we were able to meet him through a fluke and acquire the truck for the museum. Mike, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.